All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to break down a film that did way more than just define a moment in time. It pretty much predicted the future. Of course, we're talking about The Matrix and why all these years later, it's wild how it feels less like sci-fi and more like, well, a documentary of our lives now. Yeah, these are the big questions, right? I mean, this movie was a cultural atom bomb when it dropped, but its real legacy, its staying power, isn't just about the cool bullet time and black leather. It's about how it tapped into this deep, growing anxiety about the world, an anxiety that has only gotten more intense since. So picture this. It's 1999, and bam, The Matrix hits theaters. It felt like it happened overnight. It just became this fundamental piece of pop culture. Sure, it made a ton of money and critics loved it, but its true power, the thing that would make it last, was brewing just beneath the surface. And that's the key thing to get here. This was no accident, not at all. What the Wachowskis did, and it was just brilliant, was they pulled together all these different kind of underground ideas that were bubbling up at the time. You had dystopian fiction, Japanese anime, 90s alternative music, even some really heady philosophy. They mixed it all into this perfect storm.
Okay, so let's break down the ingredients. First up, how we thought about the future was changing, big time. You know that shiny, happy Jetsons-style future we were all promised? Well, by the 90s, that dream was definitely starting to look a little rusty.
So you had these two competing visions, right? On one side, the clean, easy future we were all supposed to get, but on the other, something way darker. Think about a movie like 1982's Blade Runner. That gave us a totally different picture. Dark, gritty, corporations running everything, and technology, it wasn't our friend anymore. It was starting to feel like a threat. And that pessimism really set the stage.
And this whole vibe, this new kind of science fiction, it got a name: cyberpunk. It wasn't about spaceships and aliens in some far-off galaxy. No, this was about the near future, where tech was incredibly advanced, but society was falling apart. The mantra was high tech, low life. And the book that basically wrote the rulebook for all of this, that was William Gibson's 1984 novel, Neuromancer.
And get this, Gibson's novel literally gave the film its most important words. He came up with the term cyberspace for the shared virtual world you could plug your brain into. And what did he call that shared illusion? Yep, The Matrix. It was right there all the way back in '84. At the same time, something huge was coming over from Japan: anime. And it was completely blowing up the whole Western idea that cartoons are just for kids. You had films like Akira, which was super violent and complex. And then you had Ghost in the Shell, pure cyberpunk, all about what it means to be human in a cybernetic world. And its visual style? Well, let's just say the Wachowskis were taking very detailed notes. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the music of the time, because the soundtrack to this era tells a big part of the story. It wasn't just what we thought the future would look like, it was about how we felt about the present. The whole vibe of the culture was shifting. I mean, think about the '80s. It was all slick pop music, big hair, that showbiz sparkle. Then 1991 happens, and Nirvana just kicks the door off the hinges. The '90s alternative scene, that wasn't about getting famous. It was raw. It was about frustration and anger. It was a giant middle finger to all the fake, manufactured stuff that came before it. But what's so interesting is that at the very same time you have all this authentic anger, you've got the explosion of boy bands and pop princesses. And these groups, they weren't about reality at all. They were products, perfectly engineered by record labels. You could almost call it a simulation of a band, designed to be as popular as possible. And believe it or not, there's a philosophical term for this. A French philosopher, Jean Baudrillard, called it hyperreality. And what that means is, it's the point where the simulation, the copy, becomes so real and so everywhere that we can't tell the difference between it and the original anymore. And worse, we kind of stop even caring which is which. Okay, so you've got these big ideas swirling around in the culture, right? Dark futures, fake realities. It's all very philosophical. But then something came along that took all this abstract stuff and made it feel very, very real. And that, of course, was the internet. So the internet actually started as this thing called ARPANET, a military project born from Cold War paranoia. It went public in '91, but the real game changer was the Netscape browser in '93. Suddenly, anyone could get online, and the growth was just insane. And that explosion led directly to this massive worldwide panic at the end of the decade. Remember the Y2K bug? The big scare was that when the clock ticked over to the year 2000, computers wouldn't know what to do with the 00, and everything would just break. Power grids, banks, you name it. And Y2K was a huge moment. It was the first time we, as a society, had to look around and realize, whoa, our entire lives now depend on these computer systems, and most of us have no idea how they actually work.
And this is the moment. This is where it all comes together. You've got the cyberpunk look, that 90s feeling of disillusionment, and now this very real anxiety about technology. And right into the middle of that perfect storm, walk the Wachowskis.
No, the Wachowskis were basically sponges for pop culture. Comics, anime, philosophy, you name it. They wrote this incredible script for The Matrix, but the studios were like, no way, this is a massive, expensive, complicated movie. We're not giving it to a couple of first-time directors. So what they do? They went out and directed a smaller, low-budget thriller called Bound. It was fantastic, critically acclaimed, and it proved to the studio they had the skills. It worked like a charm, and The Matrix got the green light.
But here's the true genius of what they did. It wasn't just about having all these cool underground ideas. It was how they packaged them. They took all this complex stuff, cyberpunk, hyperreality, anime, and they wrapped it up in one of the oldest, most familiar stories in the world, the hero's journey. By doing that, they made these niche ideas exciting and understandable for absolutely everyone.
And that right there, that's why we're still talking about this movie today. Because all those themes that seemed kind of abstract and philosophical back in 1999, they're not abstract anymore. They've become the reality we live in every single day. The themes of The Matrix are literally the themes of our time.
I mean, just look at the parallels. They're almost spooky. The movie talks about a simulated world. Well, we live through our curated social media feeds. It had sentient machine overlords. We have a few giant tech companies that control pretty much everything. In the movie, humans were batteries. For us, our data is the product. And rogue AI agents? That doesn't really sound like science fiction anymore, does it? You see, the reason the movie hit so hard is that it wasn't just making stuff up. It was putting a name to a feeling we all had. It took all those little anxieties, all those different cultural threads, and wove them together into one big story. And that story felt true, because deep down, we kind of already knew that's where things were heading. So let's go back to that first question. What made The Matrix so special? It's because it perfectly captured the spirit of its time. But the reason it feels more relevant today is because it wasn't just a snapshot of the past. It was a prophecy. It wasn't just a movie. It was a mirror held up to the future. And that future is our present.